to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So welcome to the September webinar. Today we're going to have Colt and Nicolas discuss DevSecOps in the DoD environment. Before we go to them, we're going to have a quick overview of FC Atlanta. FC Atlanta has been around for about 50 years. We have approximately 300 members, and we are a not-for-profit organization that supports or promotes the STEM environment, science, technology, engineering, and math. And we do that through a coordinating work with a lot of the military DoD, federal government environment, but also commercial enterprises and local institutions. We have a parent organization, FC International, which has about 31,000 members worldwide and 140 chapters with 1,600 plus corporations. And several of them are headquartered out of Atlanta. Our focus has been more of a community focus lately. About 10 years ago, Fort McPherson, Fort Gillem bracked out. And so we've got Dobbins Air Reserve Base, which is where our military base is. But we also do work with Georgia Tech, the USO, a number of organizations around Atlanta, Vistacom Tech Systems, Veeam, who's today's sponsor. And we are working on finding new ways to get involved. We have done judging of science fairs in the past, which they're kind of on hold this year. So we're talking to see what new options might look like. We also have teacher tool grants and scholarships that we award on an annual basis. So there's a lot of things going on. You can check out our website. There's things posted there. There's communications, and it also connects you with FC International. So, now, this month's sponsor is Veeam, and we've got Mike Miller and Jeff Richard here. You want me to hand over the slides to you there?
That sounds perfect.
Hand those to Jeff.
Yep, I will go ahead and share that out.
Can you take that, or do you want me to hand it to you?
I'm trying to share, but, oh, there we go. Let's take a look. It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Really? Let's see.
You have to get your
hang on a second. Yeah.
in-house tech support.
Okay, try it now.
All right. Completely different experience. Perfect. All right. And I'll let Mike kick things off for the Veeam team.
Thanks, Jeff. I just wanted to thank everybody and let you know that it's our pleasure, as always, to support AFCEA and the work that AFCEA does supporting the warfighter and those who support the warfighter. And it's our privilege being able to sponsor this event. You have two extraordinary speakers, and as I was mentioning to some of the folks who were on the call earlier, I'm planning to use the resume and the extraordinary accomplishments of Mr. Chaillan to shame my teenager into being a little bit more focused and dedicated in school. People typically think of Veeam as a backup and disaster recovery company. We'll spend a few minutes going through the sort of things we do, but not go into a ton of detail because it's really not about us. But when Blair brought the opportunity to us to sponsor this, there are some interesting and compelling features that many of you already have, and many of our government customers already have, that they don't have to pay any extra for, that come with the backup and disaster recovery, that are extremely powerful with regard to the DevSecOps environment, as well as in development in general, whether it's taking your environment and adding patches or doing your STIG work and making sure that you do it in an environment and in a way that it doesn't bring your systems down when you put it into production. Some very unique capabilities. So we're really excited to be able to talk about that. And rather than spending a ton of time during this call doing that, we'll obviously be able to talk a little bit about that during Jeff's discussion. But we're also very happy to follow up with anybody that has any questions about that, especially folks that are already using Veeam. And we'll be more than happy to explain to you how you can utilize this capability that you've already got without having to spend additional money. So with that, I'll hand it over to Jeff.
Sounds perfect. Thanks, Mike. So I'm totally looking forward to Colt and Nicolas's talk today as well. It seems totally interesting, in part because it is the whole DevSecOps conversation is right up the alley with what we're hearing from a lot of our customers these days. Mike said that many people know us from backup. Those of you who know Blair know that he works for Veeam, probably know Veeam from backup. And we've led in the whole virtualized backup space for years now. But there's a lot more that goes into backup, especially as you expand out the platforms that you're dealing with. We have a lot of folks who rely on our orchestration and automation capabilities, our reporting capabilities. All those are a big part of what we do, because as folks' environments grow from on-premises virtualization and on-premises physical servers up to the cloud, up to software as a service, now containers, especially Kubernetes and vSphere 7, we're seeing a whole lot of interest in protecting these new workloads and automating the capabilities around them. When we talk about Veeam and we talk about a cloud data management platform, that's not really intuitive for a lot of people. They understand backup and they know backup needs to be reliable. When we talk about cloud data management, the outcomes that we're driving are basically the things over on the right. It starts with backup, cloud mobility, the ability to get your backups or your production workloads up to the cloud non-disruptively, monitoring, orchestration, and then obviously governance and compliance go along with all that. As Mike mentioned, there's two capabilities we're going to focus on today because they're relevant to the whole DevSecOps capability. And those specific capabilities are not around backup or our storage integrations per se or other stuff. They're around data reuse using Veeam. I was on the phone with a customer yesterday who said their biggest pain point with their existing backup solution is that when they refresh their dev environment, they have to do a restore, which they do all weekend long to stream the data from the last full backup of their large database environment into their development environments. The developers can work on that in the coming week. There's two specific capabilities baked into Veeam. One of them was mentioned on this slide. It's Data Labs. The other one came out in version 10. So let's take a look at that, which is the newest version of Veeam. That's called the Data Integration API. All that API does is give folks a programmatic way to take their backup data and mount it for reuse on any Windows or Linux server that they want to mount it to. So you can use it for security analysis if you want to do forensics after a security event and see, well, when did the malware first appear on our systems? It's pretty easy to mount your backups and scan back through if you need to do that. You can do it for various compliance purposes. Another big purpose, just like I mentioned, is to streamline the population of data into your whole CI/CD workflow for DevSecOps. Refresh the data that you're looking at, refresh the data that you're testing on without having to, like the customer I was on the phone with yesterday, spend literally all weekend restoring that data before you can do that stuff. So very, very interesting, very intriguing, and a lot of ways that folks have started using that since it rolled out. And again, that's a capability that's only been in Veeam since February of this year when version 10 was released.
Wow.
Oh, so yeah, it's a great capability. Something that's been around for a lot longer is Data Labs. And Mike just mentioned that. Data Labs is a little bit different. Data Labs doesn't just let you take the backup data and mount it so it looks like a disk and you can do stuff to it. It lets you spin up the whole workload that you backed up in an isolated environment. Now, one of the big uses that we hear for this, Mike mentioned before, if you're part of an environment where you've got to stig your servers, you've got to keep up with patches for security purposes, everyone on this call that's ever had to patch an application environment that has a lot of different connected parts knows sometimes if you patch on day one, you break your application, right? So it's very painful to do that and then have to roll back to the backup before your patches and spend all weekend in the data center. Great use for Data Labs is the ability to actually spin up that application environment with all 6 or 8 servers or whatever the case may be, the number of workloads connected to it, patch it, make sure everything's going to work by testing it in a sandbox on Wednesday afternoon. And then when your maintenance window comes on Saturday night, you're free and clear, you're good to go. The play-in for DevSecOps for populating development environments is also obvious, but patches is something that we see a lot. DR simulations, not going to go into that. You can see the use cases listed here. patching and populating development environments is another really, really great use of this. And it's a way to do it without long delays as you populate those environments. So we want to keep things brief today. I'm just going to present one more slide. Those of you that know Blair have probably looked into Veeam, or those of you who are Veeam customers, thank you. If you don't know Veeam, we're pretty good at what we do. We've been in the Gartner Leaders Quadrant for data center backup for the last 4 years. This year, we're listed pretty clearly as the leader for ability to execute. The only reason that I'm pointing that out is that that ability to execute, it should be a good sign to you that when we talk about the sort of advanced capabilities that we offer, like data labs or the data integration API, this is stuff that we don't just say that it works. It's not slideware. It's stuff that's been implemented and that our customers have told Gartner analysts and other analysts repeatedly, it really does work. It's a fully baked solution. You're good to go with it. So do think of us. We've got several folks from Veeam who are going to be on the call the whole time. And we're happy to give you more information as you need it. Thanks very much for the time. I'm excited about the talk today.
Thank you very much. So let me take the slide back, see if I can do that.
There, let me stop sharing. That should make it easier.
Yeah. Okay. So today we're very lucky to have a couple of great folks. First is Colt Whittle, who is our local FCA AVP of programs. And it turns out he also has a side gig as the Chief Experience Officer of the United States Air Force. He's working there to help kind of transform the communication capabilities and the IT service delivery. And prior to that, he was the Vice President and Client Partner at Isobar, and he founded Endless Wave Capital. And prior to that, he also served in a couple roles at Deloitte and Roundarch. So thank you for being here, Colt. Really appreciate it. And then second in the fireside chat is Nicolas Chaillan, who at 15 founded World Act, making him one of France's youngest entrepreneurs, which is, as discussed earlier, is helping us shame all of our kids for not doing things by the time they're 15. He went on to successfully launch and manage a dozen companies after that. And he's an expert in numerous areas, cybersecurity, DevSecOps, IoT, big data, virtual reality, cloud computing, and wearables. And now he is the first chief software officer in the federal government, where he is working on bringing DevSecOps across the DoD environment. So welcome, Nicolas. So, Colt?
Sure. Hey, thank you, Paul. Appreciate it. And thank you to the Veeam folks for sponsoring. So, Nicolas, are you there?
I'm here. Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
Very good. Hey, thanks.
Hey, why don't we just get started with maybe if you could just tell a little bit about your background and how you ended up. How does a 15-year-old entrepreneur from Marseille, France, end up working at the Air Force?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a usual thing. I think when I still show up at the Pentagon, people are always wondering if I should be there or not with a French accent and all. But my take is, I started, pretty young at 7 coding, and then, I joined the PHP team. I was a contributor of PHP back, I was 14, and then created the company at 15, and then, from there, love innovation and getting things done. And so I overall, I think we built 187 IP. We sold to about 47 Fortune 500 and then 12 companies. So that was pretty cool stuff. But, I guess my background is cyber/software. And I love bringing world premieres to life and tackle the pretty cool stuff. Like, we did the Surface Table with Microsoft, the Kinect, and, the face APIs to recognize faces with Facebook, and, taking picture of your checks, to be able to deposit your check with Chase. And so a lot of cool stuff. And I guess what triggered first my 18 months at DHS was the Paris attacks. I lost a couple of people I knew during the attacks, and so I thought, hey, 11 companies made enough money. Mobile apps are cool, but not making a difference how do we take some of my expertise and bring it to really save lives? And so I say at DHS, I was a chief architect, brought, the first ever in the government zero trust stack back 4 years ago to DHS. I created cyber.gov, which was the holistic cyber architecture for all of the .gov agencies. And then, got a call to come and bring DevSecOps to DoD, and could not say no to that. So that's kind of the journey there.
That's amazing. So before we get into kind of the solution, could you maybe talk a little bit about what's the problem, right? What is not working? What is the problem with how software gets developed, operated, maintained in the Air Force in the past, and hopefully not much longer?
Yeah, I don't know. It's almost like the everything was wrong. So I don't even know where to begin. Normally we would set up contracts that would be waterfall based with requirement driven 5 years ahead, no ability to learn or fix things, using primes with very little engagements with smaller companies. Timeliness, honestly, at the end of the day, was the biggest issue. We should never be in a situation where we end up spending 5 years to end up waking up and realizing we just lost $5 billion of taxpayer money because we built things in a vacuum without input from the end user and trying to do iterative development, right? So I think the timeliness piece, we have more money, more people than anybody combined often. You compare with a SpaceX that has 200 developers for all of the 11 platforms of SpaceX, including the boat that catches the rocket landing back. So 200 developers for 4,000 developers just for F-35, right? And that's just one platform, right? So both, in terms of the quality of the execution, the timeliness, and I think for me, the biggest impact is the timeliness, right? I think saving money is great, but that's not the end goal. The goal is to be able to compete. And in a world where technology moves faster than ever, I've yet to see in my career a time where you become, as an IT person, obsolete within 2 years. It used to be you can get away with, doing things the same way for 4 or 5 years, maybe 10, and still be able to do some business. But when you look at Kubernetes, you look at containers, you look at service meshes, you look at cloud, the pace and the increase in continuous learning and not being stuck and getting stale is now incredible. And I think the two pillars that we're trying to solve with DevSecOps are, one, the timeliness component, and then the culture/people problem where we need to empower people to continuously learn. And I can tell you, I think if I put my investor hat back, I had a VC for 2 years investing in companies. If I put my investor hat back, I would drive my investments based on the quality of their DevSecOps stack and based on the ability they are providing to their employees to continuously learn. I give my teams an hour a day to catch up and learn. And, that's the minimum that a team needs today to be able to even keep up with what's going on in tech. And so we get so busy, with predefined long-term planning that we forget to look around and see that everyone is passing us and we're 5 miles behind, and I think we just can't afford that, right? So funny enough, when I started, I had no kids, right? And 2 years later, so I started back in August 2018, and I had my daughter, in October, so she's almost 2 years, and I had twins just 4 months ago, so I went to 3, right? So 0 to 3, but that changed my mind when it comes to the urgency, of getting this done, because we cannot be in a situation in 20, 30, 40 years where we fail our kids and spend billions of dollars a year of taxpayer money and nothing to show for it.
Hey, spot on. Hey, so you mentioned DevSecOps a couple of times. Could you maybe drill down a little bit? I think everybody probably knows what it is, but to you, what is really kind of the heart of DevSecOps? What is it about? And then how does that help the Air Force?
Yeah, so I think I like to go through the journey, right? We were at Waterfall doing, predefined requirements, 5-year timeframes, delivery of capability every 3 to 5 years, whatever, right? Then we said, okay, there's this thing called Agile, which is, by the way, 20 years old, and we still talk about Agile, which drives me insane. I think when I started 20 years ago, I was already using Agile, so it's just like, what are you talking about? But then, DevOps came, 10 years? I don't even think people realize that DevOps is 10 years old, right? And then there's SecOps, right? So for me, it's evolutions of the principles. Agile brought that kind of Scrum, Kanban mindset, work in progress, lean, all these principles from Toyota, and all these continuous learning, continuous iteration, fail fast, don't fail twice for the same reason, right? So the timeliness piece and the continuous feedback and the learning piece, and not being afraid of failing, right? You didn't fail 1,000 times, you found 1,000 times how not to do something, and now you have less chance to fail, and you're going to probably find the right answer pretty soon. And so empowering the culture change of Agile and that mindset of, okay, it's okay to fail, though I always add, but don't fail twice for the same reason, because that's when I get upset. And so that's the Agile mindset. The DevOps piece brought that continuous integration, continuous delivery, where we realized, wait, this is complex technology. Technology is moving fast. We need automation, right? So we brought this automation layer on top to continuously push software, automate testing, cyber scanning, and all that basic software lifecycle, all the way to the deployment and the delivery of the software into production, and streamlining, automating that, which led Google and Facebook to do, SpaceX is doing 17,000 releases a day, right? And 3 full hardware loop testing a day, and they can update the software of a rocket, the day before the launch, right? Because they increase test coverage, they increase their trust in that automated testing to do both, basic unit testing, integration testing, end-to-end testing, all the way to regression testing, and make sure, like Google is doing 150 million tests on their software a day to make sure they're not breaking things by making changes. So once you trust your ability to check you're not breaking things, and you trust your quality, your software quality, you can now move faster. And so you improve that pace, and ideally you should see a growth in delivery of capability, smaller increments, right? So less moving from monolithic systems to microservices, more agile, more modular, something that can be cut into smaller pieces so it's not impacting the entire system. We just did last week a launch of a jet where we managed to, for the first time ever, update the software while in flight. That's doable because we're decoupling the flight control piece from the mission stuff that we can update more easily. That's not impacting the flight controls of the jet. And if you have a monolithic system, very difficult to do. So that's a DevOps piece. And DevOps for me is that automation piece, that continuous integration, continuous delivery. DevSecOps is what people don't yet fully understand, is bringing not just the cyber piece, right? It's not just the static dynamic code analysis side of the house, which is part of DevOps and has been there for years. It's moving to zero trust. It's moving to continuous monitoring. It's beyond just the pipeline. It's production runtime, continuous monitoring, and we're using Kubernetes and sidecar containers to bring that behavioral detection, to bring that continuous scanning capability, the zero trust enforcement. So container A has to be whitelisted to be able to communicate, which reduces the attack surface. That's using chaos engineering, which is about killing stuff in production to see how resilient your system is. And it's never been more important for the DoD to be able to be tracking what exactly is needed for a system to run, right? Because once you move to microservices, you have 700 microservices. Netflix is able to tell you these 20 microservices out of my 700
all needed to watch a movie, right? The rest, it can go down. I have no impact on my mission, right? And it's abstracted or it's cached or there's a bunch of different things they can do to mitigate the impact. But we should know very much the same for a weapon, right? Not every piece of the weapon is necessary to be up and running. And with monolithic systems, if one piece goes down, the entire system goes down. And that's just not resilient. That's not where we want to be. So it's bringing security, resilience, high availability, elasticity, cloud agnosticity, so we don't get locked into a cloud provider. Be able to run the same container, same Lego blocks across teams, right? We had 22 F-22, F-35, 40% of the code could have been reused, yet 0% was reused, right? And so by moving to containers, right, we will be mandating now that these Lego blocks can be reused. So if a sensor on the F-35 jet needs to be reused by the Navy in Aegis, they can take that sensor out of the container and reuse it because it's a Lego blocks, it's cut right, it's not tightly coupled with the rest of the system, and that enables reuse. So the entire, everything I just said is DevSecOps.
That's awesome. So you talked about the, by the way, I think your mic may have been kind of going out there a little bit. I'm not sure what happened. Just FYI. That's annoying. Oh, we could hear you. We could hear you. You just sounded like you might be in a tin can.
Well, I'm in an RV, so I don't know if that's true. But let me. I am with my buds, but I don't know what happened. That's weird.
All right, so it's good now.
Technology. So
Yeah. So Nicolas, you talked a little bit. You've talked about the what, but organizationally, how do we roll this out? And I think people may have heard about these things in the Air Force called software factories. What are the software factories? What are they about? Why do they have funny names? Why don't we start there?
Some of the names I'm not a fan of because I want to make sure we have our own identity. Although I guess if you look at the Platform One logo behind me, you're going to see Smokey the Bear, Baby Yoda, the Cubanese logo, and a lot of fun stuff. But that's part of the culture and part of the showing that we are doing things a little bit differently. But I love the logo, I have to say. It's probably the best logo I've seen, but I might be biased. So the name's always interesting. Star Wars, you're going to find a lot of different analogies there across DoD. We have a lot of them. We have, we're getting close to 20 plus just in the Air Force and DoD. I don't even know. There's so many. The concept first, we realized when I started, each team was spending a lot of time building the platform, the factory. So what we mean by factory is automating that DevSecOps pipeline, all these steps, all these automation to instantiate a dedicated stack on the cloud, on premise for hardware in the loop testing. And all these teams were building their own stack from scratch, spending often a year and millions of dollars of taxpayer money to get to a point where they had a factory, just so now they can focus on building their mission software using that factory, which one might say was their primary mission. And we're not here to build factories, right? We're here to build software. And so the first piece was to say, okay, let's create enterprise capability. And that's really critical and foundational for the success of organizations out there that are trying to embrace DevSecOps. You need to bring these as enterprise capabilities. And really, when I look at what Platform One has been able to do, Platform One really is the enterprise service for all of DoD. It's not an Air Force thing. I mean, it's Air Force as an executive agent, but it is provided as a service to all of DoD. And funny enough, if you listen to SecDef during his speech, the last speech, he mentioned 3 programs, ABMS and F-35, and the last one was Platform One. I mean, that's kind of incredible that we would be mentioned during that speech. That tells you that it's a prime enabler for all these programs and AI and all these teams to piggyback on the work so they don't have to reinvent the wheel. So Software Factory now is moving to Platform One, and Platform One is providing software pipelines as a service, although you don't want to have a one-size-fits-all. So Platform One has options. We have what we call the Party Bus. So again, back to your funny name concept, right? Party Bus is a multi-tenant environment that's already up and running, already accredited. Teams can just come and use it. Within days, we can provide access to any of the DoD teams to the Party Bus. That's the ABMS stack, and that's where we have a lot of teams coming and do work directly. It's already accredited. It's already on multiple classification levels. And then you have the Big Bang. And so the Big Bang, another funny name, is where we are bringing a dedicated enclave for larger programs like an F-35 or GBSD, where they need specific tools. So we support with Platform One moving to containers. We support 200 containers right now between 23 databases, 16 programming languages. We have 50 plus AI machine learning, deep learning tools, right? I mean, it's endless when it comes to the number of tools we support when it comes to DevSecOps tools, cyber tools, static dynamic analysis, fuzzing, pen testing. I mean, you name it, right? And so really at the end of the day, it's about bringing options, centrally accrediting software. So we're becoming also the repo of trusted containers, not just for DoD, but dozens of agencies and even commercial organizations. I managed to convince the leadership to open source all the work we're doing. So it's all open source and back to the world. So we have banks, Citibank, JP Morgan, Lowe's, and other organizations that come and bring that capability with them by using our secure containers. We work directly with companies to ingest these containers to get them accredited. So for a startup that has never done business with DoD, they don't have to go through FedRAMP. They don't have to do any of that stuff that usually takes a lot of money and about a year of time. We can get containers accredited between 2 to 4 weeks. So not only it's removing the barrier to entry for companies, but it's also streamlining access for the DoD programs to these technologies while ensuring that the patches and the updates of these Lego blocks are done centrally. So we save taxpayer money by consolidating that continuous monitoring, continuous scanning, continuous patching, and highly automated. I think you're muted.
Yeah, now I'm muted. Here we go. So you talked about Platform One. How do you? Well, first of all, let me just I'll make a statement before I go to the next question. I can't say enough how different this is. I mean, my past experience in DoD, particularly in the Air Force, is new program, new software program. You'd spend a year getting the infrastructure in place to be able to host it and do development. It was insane, completely insane. People get in these debate over which servers to get and go through the acquisition. It's nuts. And often you'd end up buying massive amounts of extra equipment that you didn't need, which is ridiculous. This is completely revolutionary. Can you talk about security? I think we have a fair number of, kind of cyber and security people on the phone. How do you handle that? And I've heard about this thing called continuous ATO. Tell me about that. What is all that?
Yeah, so I'm also the chair of the DSOG, which is the DoD Security Authorization Working Group for DevSecOps. And so part of the DSOG, we're building the guidance when it comes to continuous ATO and what that means. So back in October 15th, we're going to be releasing the guidance, by the way. So we're going to have way more documentation to help people understand what a continuous ATO is. But really, what it means is we it's not just accelerated fast track ATO of a piece of software. It's very different. A continuous ATO is about accrediting the software factory and what comes out of the factory, assuming it's passing the gates, and the gates are change management gates, testing gates, and cyber gates. If it's passing those gates and it's compliant with the DoD DevSecOps reference design, you get the software that comes out of the factory is also accredited, and all the way to SAP. So we're bringing reciprocity across all classification levels. We are pushing the standards to be the same. We are bringing change management gates. So how many set of eyes on code do I need to approve code change? to make sure, we have need to know, least privilege, and separation of duties as part of the process. SpaceX has always 3 set of eyes on code change to approve them, right? Same concept. Then we have high test coverage mandate, right? Unit testing, integration testing, end-to-end testing. You need to have that test to be able to pass the pipeline. And then the last piece is a cyber gate, right? So static dynamic analysis, bill of materials. What we mean by that is dependencies of dependencies, tools like Nexus Lifecycle or Black Duck to look at what is running as part of that software, what dependencies are there, and things like that. Then we have CV, of course, scanning with container security scanning and all that kind of stuff. But the more important piece, and that's the DevSecOps piece for me, is the concept we brought to life with a sidecar container security stack. The sidecar is a little container running alongside every container, right? It's injected by Kubernetes, so it's always running. The development team doesn't have to think about it. It's always there. And the sidecar can be injected separately, which is great because you don't have to coordinate releases between teams. You can inject that sidecar and have a bunch of them. It's not just one, to have different capability injected across your entire stack. And if you compare that to an agent in a VM, an agent, if the VM is compromised, the first thing the bad actor is going to do is tamper with the logs. With a sidecar container, because it's alongside, not inside, you still get visibility on what's going on. So you still get that behavioral detection. You still get that cyber benefit. So it's very exciting compared to an agent. Plus, an agent, you have to rebuild the VM. With a sidecar, you can inject it and move on. And so you don't have to coordinate with whomever is building the container. You can inject that, and you have that capability across your entire stack. So if I need to update my fifth compliance encryption, I can update my sidecar. And even if my development team is not doing any encryption whatsoever, I don't care, because my sidecar injects the mutual TLS tunnel across the entire stack and does this by default. And so the sidecar concept is really game changing. We use Istio, which is a service mesh. A service mesh is also a game changing concept that is managing the east and west traffic between containers, right? So all the containers talking to each other, they need to authenticate, they need to encrypt, they need to know they exist, so service discovery, they need load balancing and routing and all that kind of stuff. All that is done by the service mesh, and it decouples that from the application layer. And now if you have microservices built in different programming languages, you don't have to worry about sharing libraries between Java and Python and Go and PHP and C and C++ or whatever. You can just use a sidecar container to inject that capability. That's how we push Zero Trust. So Zero Trust is the following. People always say Zero Trust, but they don't know what it means. Zero Trust is denial by default on the traffic, whitelist of traffic, but with strong identities. What that means is each container has a strong certificate created by the service mesh automatically. It's rotating certificates. And so each container has its own identity and can be revoked, can be rotated. And then for container A to talk to B, it has to be whitelisted. And so with DevSecOps, we're moving to a concept called GitOps. And GitOps is everything is in Git, everything is code, and every network rule, whitelisting, test, whatever it is code. And so to enforce change management, so let's say I want to say container A can talk to B, it is now code in my source code repo. And so you can segment your source code repo by having different teams with different access. So I have a service mesh team that is responsible for authorizing access between containers. So you reduce your attack surface. So if a bad actor gets access to one of the containers, they only can talk to a limited set of other containers. And all that is done through change management in Git by enforcing who can have access to Git and how many set of eyes do I need to approve a code change. So if I have a whitelisting requested by team A, then I need 1 or 2 people to come and approve it for that to become effective in production or in staging.
Very cool. Hey, so slightly different direction, and this is more back to how do we roll this out? So you know, we have a lot. We've got here in Georgia and in the Southeast, we have a huge DoD presence, right? Obviously down at Montgomery, at Gunter, big IT and acquisition presence for the Air Force. Warner Robins is an air operations center for the Air Force. Big presence of both Army Cyber and NSA over in Augusta, and then of course Huntsville with Army Firestone and so on. The question is for software development programs in this region, you know, can they become a software factory if they want to become part of this? If they want to use Platform One, how do they do that? Can they do that?
Yeah, so part of the big push for us is to make sure we're bringing all the defense industrial base with us, right? So we don't want to do this in a vacuum. And by the way, we won't be able to succeed all scale without people like that, right? So we want to bring them with us. So we're looking at different models, right? So if you're already working with the DoD program, obviously you can get access to Platform One and be part of that team, and you're technically part of the program, although, you know, you could be contractors and have access to the same stack. And that's going to be the vision long term, right? All these big programs, F-35, GBSD, which are multi-billion-dollar programs, are being mandated to essentially move to Platform One and host their development enclave with all the subs and everybody there to do work. So no more integration, no more throwing over the fence, having 50 different source code repos, then integrated at the prime, and then the prime gives it to the government. None of that is going to continue. We're going to move to a central repo in Platform One with every team having access to the same stack, the same technology, so they can work together as a team and stop having this kind of nonsense integration over the wall. So that's the first step, is if you're already on the DoD program, that's very easy. The next step for us, and that's a little bit more complex for us, but that's what we're looking to do now, is providing access to companies that have not even done any business with DoD, and they want to be on Platform One to be able to either build their SaaS, build their COTS, or just have access to be able to sell services as work for hire to the government, right? So we built a contract vehicle for DevSecOps called the DevSecOps Basic Ordering Agreements. If you sell cloud services, if you sell talent, if you sell licenses, we recommend you try to be onboarded on that contract vehicle, or you become a sub of one of the 70 plus companies that we have on that contract. That contract is DoD wide. It's not just for the Air Force. There's no cap. We can order within 30 days. So it's very fast turnaround, and anyone can be added without being on the GSA schedule. So very easy for companies to be part of that contract vehicle, or just be a sub to one of the big guys, right? There are plenty of companies that are reseller of licenses. So if you sell COTS or SaaS, you probably want to partner with a DLT or Carsoft or company like that. That's their job. They resell software to the government. That's all they do. Good story there with Carsoft taking Splunk from $5 million to $750 million of revenue in 5 years. That's pretty good. And then it's the kind of stuff you probably want as a company, right? And then when you look at the SaaS piece, we will be providing enclaves of Platform One to companies. So we're just starting that pilot where companies can come with their SaaS instead of having to go through FedRAMP, which is a nightmare, takes a year and only gives us unclassified capability. We want to bring all classification levels, because let's face it, for DoD, the meaningful stuff happens secret and TS and above. And so we need to have classified cloud capabilities. So FedRAMP is not going to help us. So we need to bring them on our clouds and give them access to enclaves where they can get their container approved and their capability approved, and they can run that as a SaaS offering on our cloud. And the issue there, that's the one legal issue we're fixing, is they have to pay us back for the compute and storage of the SaaS, right? Someone has to pay, and the company, if they don't have a first customer. If you have a first customer, it's easy because the first customer can pay that. But if you don't have a customer yet, and I don't want that to be a blocker for companies to start getting involved. So I want to try to bring everybody, regardless if they have an existing sponsor or not in the DoD. And so we're trying to see, how does a company pays back the government for that compute storage cost? So you don't have to do FedRAMP, but you cover the cost so we can do this at scale.
Okay. Super helpful. Thank you. Hey, Nick, I'm going to take a couple questions that participants have submitted.
Wait, the first one I had one for you, because you know
Oh, all right.
you're a unique. I mean, you're the chief experience officer of the Air Force, so you know they might don't play that at the beginning of the call, but it's pretty. I mean, you're the first as well, like me, right? So, and you know we talk all the time, of course, but you know I guess my question to you is, you know, software, you know, UI, UX. Where do you start, right? It's kind of very much like me. It's like you have this massive portfolio, right? So where do you start?
Sure. Yeah, just a couple points. You're right. It is a massive portfolio, and it's software, it's enterprise information technology. So it's the network, it's the PCs, it's all of it, right? And I think what you have to do is put in place the ability to listen to users and start with what they care about most and what's going to make the biggest difference. You start measuring the needle on sort of customer sat. You essentially start to view enterprise IT or view IT in the Air Force as a digital product, just like Microsoft offers digital products, or Google or Amazon, or you know, any of them. And let's measure our user satisfaction, our customer satisfaction. Let's measure the quality of service that we're providing. And then let's listen to our users and figure out how we're going to raise the bar on that. So we're now tracking the metrics, so we know what our users think of what we're doing. And we're going to very quickly be tracking in the next few weeks, be tracking at a much better level the quality of service we're providing to our end users. And then we're going to be driving them higher. And then it's a question of what's going to move the needle the most. And you drill into what moves the needle the most. I'll just give you a case in point. I'll turn around here. That's my government issued laptop. All right.
Beautiful.
If you see that. So that is a spinning disk drive, gig RAM. That was 4 years ago. We bought 190,000 of those in 1 year. It's the most common device in the Air Force today. It does a horrible job running our required security stack, which is a fairly complicated but not particularly unusual security stack. It's all COTS software, some of which is required by DISA, although there's some debate about that. So, you know, you can go and attack, you know, the most obvious points, right? You know, go and start working the security stack because it performs very slowly and bogs down everything on the machine. If you can't do that, or you've adjusted it, as you know, improved it as much as you can, then you go and you attempt to accelerate the upgrade of the hardware so that we get, you know, as many of these spinning disk drives out of the Air Force as we possibly can. The Army is well ahead of us. They're close to 50% solid state drives at this point. We are way, way behind that. So that's just a couple of examples. And then when it comes to the software, you go where the users are, right? You go to the applications that everybody uses the most, and you start going after how to improve those for airmen and putting in place the right teams, just like the software factories are doing what they're doing. The software factories are also a very good leverage point to improve user experience of the new software that gets developed. But we also need, you know, to be influencing the programs that are going to, improve the things that are already there. So it's a combination of things, Nicolas. But I think at the end of the day, it takes data, it takes user feedback, and it takes setting priorities about where you've got the biggest leverage points, and then you go after those.
I remember when you told me about your laptop, I didn't believe you at first because I was lucky they did not give me one of the old obsolete devices. So I was completely ignorant of the problem because I have a beautiful device with an SSD drive, and you know, I guess that's the issue, right? When you don't know what's going on.
Well, I'm honestly convinced that when I joined, when I took this position last June, I'm pretty sure the CIO at the time, Bill Marion, I don't think he actually did, but I tell this all the time. Like he must have been sure that I got the worst laptop, but it also is as I said, it is the most common device used by airmen. And
Well,
so
you want to have the same
I feel
experience, right? You can't be cheating the experience, so that makes sense.
Oh.
Yeah, that's
So,
scary.
hey, couple of questions from the chat over here. As you normalize the code, does that not create a higher level of risk? GitHub is where the Chinese hang out.
Yeah, and that's why we obviously want to have deep analysis of these dependencies and where the code is coming from. But by doing it centrally, it's very much like I always use the analogy of the White House, right? People are like, well, you put all you guys in the same basket. The president, is protected at the White House. Well, yeah, but you can put a lot of layers of security in the White House to make sure nothing happens to the president. And it's very much the same thing when you consolidate and aggregate work in the central place. I mean, the central place becomes your crown jewel, and if something happens, you're in trouble. But at the same time, you can also be spending money better, smarter, and aggregate work. And so right now, we used to have dozens of teams scan the same software millions of times. And by the way, many times missing stuff. I can tell you my teams found stuff over just 8 months that were missed by NSA, Cyber Command, the Air Force, Cyber Team, everybody, all the way to very large open source slash COD software used widely everywhere. And we had multiple of these companies fix their software at massive scale. I mean, I'm talking massive organizations that you would not believe had dependencies and issues that were 13 to 14 years old on some of these massively used piece of software, including some of the Fortune 100 organizations, right? So it's not just a small startup, it's everybody. And so by doing this centrally, and they have to go through me last, which I'm probably the most annoying and painful of all of the people. So they have to go through that process, and we analyze everything. And look, we can't be perfect, and we're going to for sure have issues. I mean, it's a given. But by doing it centrally and automating it as much as possible with multiple layers of scanning, and we have multiple layers of scanning, it's not just one tool. That's how we can at least mitigate that problem.
Okay. Here's another one. Thank you, Tyler. Since most contracts in Air Force IT are for sustainment, keeping the lights on, there is little money left for transformation. How do you get DevSecOps transformation done with all these legacy systems under sustainment when large contractors have little financial incentive to innovate?
Yep, yeah, that's a real problem. So a couple of things. It's not a silver bullet answer here, but there's a couple of things we're doing. One is we're creating a single color of money for software. So there's not going to be separation of O&M, sustainment, and research and development. So that's going to streamline funding. So at least when you build your contract and you get your funding, you could do everything with that same color of money. So that's gonna simplify that problem. That's one. Two is by using what we call the strangler pattern, right? Which is taking the legacy and strangling it to bring to refactor that thing into a new microservice-based, DevSecOps-based capability while improving it, right? And that's the key of the strangler pattern. You're not spending we've seen so many teams in the government fail miserably, spending 3 years rebuilding the same thing, modernizing it. By the time they're done modernizing it, by the way, it's already legacy again. And the user is complaining they're not seeing any improvements on that solution. So for us, it's about the strangler pattern, and we spend a lot of time on the training to educate teams on how to do that, using domain-driven design to get into monolithic application to smaller domains that turn into microservices, and then making sure we improve while refactoring, not the other way around, right? And if you deliver new capabilities while refactoring that piece, slowly but surely you take a bite of the legacy and you turn it into new code. It might take years, but the good news is you're improving in the meantime. So there's satisfaction from the end user and from Congress not cutting your funding at the same time.
Okay. Back to security. The IA security cert process acceleration effort is outstanding. Will DISA recognize the software factory's approval of OEM provided code? We all know the challenge of the CON versus ATO versus DADMS, et cetera.
Yeah, so I think we are certainly improving that segmentation there. By having Platform One be the first ever DoD-wide approved with this stamp of approval as well, factory and the Contus ATO and the guidance we're releasing in partnership, by the way, with DISA. So DISA is my co-lead on the Contus ATO guidance. So we're not doing things in a vacuum. That was very important for me when I started. I'm not using waivers. I'm not cheating the system. I am fixing the system. So when I leave, it's going to stick. And so some of the documentation you're going to see is these software factory ATOs, certificate to field, and ability to ingest COTS and various open source software will have full reciprocity across DoD all the way to SAP. And I think, we are building the training that's necessary for the SCAs and ISSMs and all the AOs teams to even understand any of this stuff. Is it going to take time? Sure. Is it going to happen overnight? No. But in the meantime, I personally get involved with the AOs and their teams to train them. And so far, we have 27 AOs that are completely already on board. And we don't see really, I've yet to see a single AO refuse reciprocity of the Platform One stack. So that's exciting.
Hey, very good. Hey, I would just suggest we're at 12:58. Is there anything, Nicolas, that you want to say by way of wrap up, or Paul?
I mean, my last thing that I'll say is, people think of DevSecOps as, okay, it's getting some traction. I need to maybe start looking into it. I can tell you, right? Any company, any organization that is not using DevSecOps, very rapidly, if not already, is already obsolete, because the time loss between releases and between the ability to react to change and events, by definition, will make them obsolete. For the government, I would say it's borderline criminal not to use DevSecOps because of the taxpayer waste. And I weigh my words here, borderline criminal. And so we have to do better by the taxpayer. We cannot allow this waste of money continue when we have more budget than most countries combined, but yet very little return on investment.
That's fantastic.
Awesome. Hey, thank you.
This has been a great conversation, Nicolas. Certainly appreciate you being here. Wish we could stay longer, but it's been a great conversation. And Colt, thank you for leading it. We've got one slide to show, and then we'll be done. We got a couple of events coming up. First, I want to thank everybody for attending this webinar. Next month in October, we've got the first of our cyber series. It's going to be moderated by Peter Kress. And then the Young FCNs have a number of new events coming up here, so keep an eye out for that. And this webinar today and the past several webinars are on our YouTube channel, so subscribe to that if you want to see it. And other than that, Colt, do you have any last words?
No, just thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, Nicolas. Appreciate it. And have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Great session.
Bye-bye.
Right. Thanks.